So welcome. My name is Ian. I'm originally from Canada. I live in Denver, Colorado now, but I grew up in Canada, up in the Northwest Territories. Went to college and high school out in Kingston, just a couple hours from here. I've got family around Toronto, Waterloo kind of area. And it's good to be back in Canada. Landed on Sunday, went and got my Swiss Chalet fix, got my Tim Hortons. I know it's very stereotypical, but you miss that when you're in the United States. I'm a staff developer relations engineer at Block, and we helped Anthropic kind of formulate what MCP has become. Anthropic invented MCP, but we gave them some initial input because we were also trying to build something very similar. And what we're going to work through today is we're going to talk about how to use MCP to communicate with APIs so that your AI agent, whatever agent you want to use Goose. We have an AI agent that we've been building that's open source called Goose. And in this demo today, I'm going to get you to download Goose, and we're going to use Goose. The talk isn't about Goose. The talk is about MCP. But we're going to demo how MCP is working by using Goose. So quick agenda. I'm just going to show you a quick demo of what we're about to go build. And we're going to talk about some initial setup steps. And then some of that initial setup, you're basically going to go get an API key for Upwind Router to use as LLM. We're going to give you some LLM credits to use for today's session. We're going to give you about $5 worth of LLM credits, and they will expire when that money gets used up, or Monday, whichever comes first. So you'll have a lot of opportunity to work with that. But there's a little bit of setup involved, and so while you all are doing that setup, I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about what is MCP and how to get started on that. And then at the end, I'll share some. Yep.
You need to use this mic in order to get your voice into the recording.
Oh, I have to use this one too, not just this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
This one.
All right. Oh, just this one, not this one?
Yeah, just that.
Okay. Hi, my name's Ian. Maybe I'll send them my own audio recording so they get that first bit. All right, so apparently I need to use this microphone. So while you all are doing that LLM credit setup, I'm going to go through and talk a little bit about what is MCP, why do we need it for AI, and we'll talk about some of the differences between a resource and a tool in MCP, because that's what we're going to live code today. And then we'll get into some Q&A after that. So if you've got a phone, if you've got a QR code, go ahead and scan this. If you don't, you're welcome to use your own LLM of choice. Goose is basically an MCP client. We can use any LLM. So if you've got your own API key for something like OpenAI or Gemini, you can certainly plug that in. But we're willing to give you some LLM credits here. When you go to this page, it'll ask you for an email address, and it doesn't need to be a unique email. When you put that in, you're going to get an instruction screen that looks like this. Keep this screen open. And what you want to do is you want to open these other links in another tab in your browser. And what that will allow you to do then is get Goose downloaded and installed. And then this link here is going to show you how to plug in this API key that it gives you down here at the bottom into Goose. And I'll also be sharing these slides out at the end as well. So if you can't get it right now, you'll be able to grab it later on. All right, everybody got that QR code? All right, so while you all are working on that, I'm going to give you just a brief intro into what is MCP. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. It sounds like a bit of a clunky, very nerdy kind of name. Anthropic did come up with the idea, but Block, internally, we were building out this AI agent called Goose. We've been heavily invested in AI for a long time, and we wanted to build something like MCP. And we had a really good relationship with Anthropic. And so the folks at Anthropic contacted us and said, hey, we're doing this thing. Do you want to kind of look through this draft of what we're building? And we were able to give them some initial input on it because we told them like, hey, we're trying to do the same thing. And so it was really beneficial. We both kind of formulated what all of this happened. It is an open source protocol. And so anybody can go look at what's involved with MCP. You can suggest changes. I love working on open source. My whole career has basically been around open source. And it's basically a way to tie your AI agent into accessing external tools, external data, and you can use MCP for pretty much anything that you can program. So any kind of API, we've seen MCP servers for control my computer, go open my browser, go click on this thing, go click on that thing. I have an MCP server that talks to Mosquito at home, MQTT, to control a little autonomous robot that drives around my basement, drives my dog crazy. And I can tell Goose, like, go give my dog some exercise. And it'll just start roaming around the basement, and the dog goes, chases after it. So anything you can program, you can connect with MCP. And then through MCP, you can basically describe what all of these external tools and data are doing so that the AI agent can utilize that. All right. A little bit of history lesson here. So LangChain came out in October 2022, which tried to do some of this. OpenAI in March of 2023 said, we're going to take that one step farther, and they basically had a way to connect an open API specification into ChatGPT so that ChatGPT could interact with an API. MCP came out October of 2024. They're all doing very similar things. Under the hood, they're just providing a lot of documentation and context to AI so that AI knows what to do, how to go interact with your API or whatever it is you're programming. Today, though, we're going to be building around an API. So the important thing that we need to learn here, basically what we're going to be live coding today are resources and tools. A resource is effectively, it's tied to a data source and tends to be read-only. This is typically used with APIs. It doesn't have to be read-only, but for what we're going to do today, our resources are going to do GET calls to an API, and we're going to treat that as a resource. A tool is something that you can connect something external, some other program. Let's say you want to interact with your browser, and you've got a way to hook into your browser, that would be a tool. Or if you want to go run some other application like Figma and do some creative design, you can do that through a tool. The idea of prompts here is basically a predefined prompt template that if a user says, like, I want to do this thing, but I don't know how, you can pre-program some prompts into your MCP that can help the user understand how to use the MCP for the MCP then to go talk to whatever that external tool is. And so there's a really great feedback loop that you can build into this as well. The main ones that we're going to talk about here, today we're going to be running this locally on your laptops. And so we're going to be using standard input-output, or standard I/O. We can also do MCP using remote and streaming protocols like HTTP streaming and server-sent events, which are really handy if you want to host that MCP server somewhere else where you manage that. When you have an MCP that runs over standard I/O, it's running on your laptop, which means if you write an MCP server for someone else to use, it needs to run on their laptop or computer or server. And the idea there is you have less control over what they're doing with it because they're downloading the code, they can change it. But it's less intensive and you don't have to worry about deployments and so on if you're just running it locally. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be building an MCP server that runs remote or runs locally on your system beside Goose. And so we're going to use Goose to talk to an MCP that's running on your system to then go talk to an API, which is also going to be running on your system, to tell us some jokes. I've been a dad for 16 years. I love dad jokes. But I do want to acknowledge that not all dad jokes translate well because they do play on a lot of English terminology. And so if some of the jokes seem a little off, I'm very open to feedback. So please talk to me afterward and be like, yeah, that joke is weird. And I'll go change it up. All right, so now we're going to get into the coding. We've got an hour and 15 minutes. So I've got this repo, and this is basically going to walk you through everything. This is meant to be kind of a code along. We can do it all together, but it's also self-paced. You can totally just work at this at your own speed if you like. If you need more time, great. If you want to finish it up early, great. But we're going to work through this in chunks. There's basically several stages that we can work through. The most common troubleshooting thing is we're going to be running a script called main.py. Main.py is also going to be your API service, and your MCP service, not the same one, but they're both called main.py, and I'm going to change that for the next iteration of this workshop. I'm going to call it like MCP server.py and API server.py, but I ran out of time trying to change that here. But one thing that you'll notice in the README file on that README is a couple things. The first one is I'm a big believer in nobody getting left behind. If you get stuck on something, because we got a room of 30 odd people in here, I've basically developed this Git repo in a way that there are checkpoint branches that if you get really, really stuck, you can just check out the next branch and you'll be caught up to everybody else. And so if you ever get stuck and you get frustrated, don't feel like, oh, I can't even finish this and like get up and leave. You can just save your work in a different branch, check out this other branch, and you'll be caught up with everybody else. So if you do run into troubleshooting problems, the biggest thing that you can run in your terminal is just pkill. I like to throw a -9 in there. The -9 is like, no, really, I want you to like absolutely kill this process, and then just give it main.py. Now this will terminate anything called main.py that you have running on your server, which will also stop your API server as well. So what you're going to see me do is I'm going to have two terminal windows open. One terminal window is going to be my API server. The other terminal window is going to be the MCP, just in case we need any other shell commands going in there. But Goose should be doing everything for us. So once you have Goose up and running, we're basically going to add this code as an extension. I'm going to demonstrate all that. You'll be able to see what I'm doing on the TV here as we go. Cool. Any questions before we get started? All right, well, let's dive in. You'll have to forgive me because I didn't realize I had to hold this mic, and live coding with one hand is going to be a little tricky. But let's do a quick demo here. So this is Goose. This is the Goose interface. And what I'm going to tell Goose here is, tell me a joke about programming. Now, what Goose is going to do is it's going to go look through all of the extensions that I have, and in this case, it enabled my joke MCP, and it basically gave me back a joke here. So this is basically what we're going to be working on. All right, so I wish they had a better mic stand for this. We'll see how this goes. All right, so I'm going to clone out that repo. I'm just going to clone it into something. I'm just going to call it MCP. You will need to know the disk path of where this is. So for me, I'm just doing it under my home folder, users, END, MCP. Wherever you put yours, you're going to have to know this whole disk path to get started. That's how we're going to run our API. And you need to tell the MCP where to find your API. It'll probably be on localhost, port 8000. But inside of here, we've got two folders. We have the API and we have our MCP, and this is where we're going to get started. This initial main branch is just very rudimentary how we're getting started on things, and then from there we're going to kind of live code out everything else that we need to do here. So let me minimize this. Did everybody get the LLM credits and everything going with Goose? If you're not sure, just open the Goose interface and ask Goose to try to do something. And if it connects to your LLM, then it's working. Oh, you have Windows. Okay. Okay. We are working on, I think it's still an alpha stage for Windows.
Yeah, I mean, we have some alpha versions.
Yeah, it's not.
If you have WSL, you can use the Goose CLI.
Yeah, I installed WSL and now I didn't like so don't wanna move it now.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. So what errors are you seeing when you put in that API key? What error do you see?
Oh, I tried to type something in with Goose now. It says authentication.
Sorry, what does it say?
Authentication.
Authentication error. So it sounds like the API keys aren't working. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is Salman. Salman works at Block with me. He's one of the Goose engineers. So he's going to do his best to kind of wander around and help get folks going with some of this. Okay, so I've got this checked out. So I'm just going to open my code editor here. Like I said, I'm going to do my best to live code this and explain what I'm doing as I go. So we've got these two folders. We've got our joke API and we have our joke MCP server. The first thing we're going to do is go to a terminal, and I'm going to start my API server. So I'm going to go into jokes API, and all I need to run here is uv run main.py. uv is basically the package controller that we're going to use. It kind of runs pip under the hood. My understanding is UV is written in Rust and it's way faster. This is basically going to start downloading all the dependencies that you need, and then our API is up and running here. If you want to run a curl command, you can run a curl command and you can access port 8000/joke, and you should get a random joke back, just to verify that your API is up and running. Jensen?
It seems to require some dependencies from Square.
Just for the API server?
Yeah, UV run.
Let me double check. So how did you check it out? Oh, so it's just going to be called MCP jokes. Yep, so CD space MCP dash jokes. If you put a different folder name at the end, it would have called it something different. Yeah. So now from there, go into the jokes underscore API folder and then run UV run from there.
I don't have UV.
You don't have UV? So you should, in that case, you should be able to pip install UV, and then UV will do everything else from there. Basically, the reason I'm using UV here is because it'll set up the virtual environment, it'll download all the dependencies, and it'll basically manage all that for you.
Can I just maybe?
Yep.
Yeah, if some of you, the API key isn't working, maybe try going to settings and see if you are using the open router provider and not the Anthropic one, because although you're like querying Anthropic, but it's going through open router, which is the API key.
So is that the models here?
That would be, so you're using the block version, so that's why it's a different one.
Oh, it's going to look different
yeah,
for them?
Yeah.
Okay.
But if for everyone else, they should be able to see like configure providers, and then you want to set up the API key with open router, and then use a model name of Anthropic/Claude for Sonnet. You can look that up on the web.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. All right. So let me go run my API here. Is anybody else still having problems with dependencies getting the API to run? Or did everybody get through that? What error are you getting? Okay. Okay. So it won't show up as an app. It'll have unpacked that in your downloads folder, and you'll need to run it from there.
creating VNV and then
Okay. If you're having problems with the dependency, just delete the UV lock, uv.lock. Just delete that file and do UV run again, and it should redo that. Yeah, apologies on that. Yep, that's right. Yep. If you go to /joke at the end, then it'll pull up a random joke for you. Just /joke. Yeah. No jokes found.
For the dogs, it works.
We're trying to get the API.
Yeah, we're just trying to get the API running right now. Yep. Give me 1 sec here.
So I get everybody saying not
So when you have the API running, if you just curl localhost 8000 /joke, you should get a joke back from that. So if you have problems with UV, just delete uv.lock, and then for your API again, all we're doing here is we're running uv run main.py. But you might need to go ahead and delete that UV lock first, and then run this, and it'll download all your dependencies, and it'll create a new UV lock specifically for you. And then from there, in another terminal window, I'm just doing this curl command here, curl localhost :8000 /joke, and that should pull up a random joke from that API.
joke with an S.
No, just single, just /joke.
Okay, it's running.
Okay. All right, everybody good? Everybody got the API running? Everybody got a joke? Which one? Yep. If your other API key didn't work, just know that when you go back to this QR code, you'll need a different email address. It does need to be a unique email. Okay, so now if you open your code editor, we're going to go into the jokes MCP folder from here, and most of the work that we're going to do is going to be inside main.py. There will be a little bit of work in the manifest that we need to modify here real quick. Let me just go pull that up. So there's a manifest.json file in the jokes MCP server. So all of the work that we're going to do for the rest of the session is going to be inside jokes MCP. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a quick change to the manifest.json. And what you need to change here is that path down here at the bottom. You're going to see this current working directory. You need to change this path to be the path of wherever you've checked out your code. So for me, that's going to be users/end/mcp/jokesmcp. So in your manifest.json file, look for this line that starts with CWD, and you need to modify this first part of the path to be where you checked out your code.
Can it be a relative?
It will need to be an absolute path, yeah.
And it's to the repo, right?
To wherever you checked out the repo, yeah. So this manifest file is how Goose is going to launch the MCP server. And so it needs a full path to where the main.py lives. So it's going to be the jokes MCP main.py. And so we're going to do this in a current working directory here, just so we don't have to repeat the directory name in multiple places. So, but you do need to set this in your manifest file, otherwise this won't work. Okay, everybody got that one done? Okay. I'm just, because we got limited time, I do want to get through at least a couple of the endpoints. We probably won't have time to get through the whole workshop, but I do want to show you a little bit about how to add this MCP server kind of as is into Goose already. Now my interface in Goose is going to look a little bit different than yours, but in the top right corner you should see this gear icon up in the very top right corner. You're going to click on that gear icon and you're going to go to Advanced Settings. If you're on the command line, you're going to run goose configure. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to scroll down to where you see extensions. And down at the bottom of that, we should have a control to add a custom extension. So you're going to go into settings, you're going to go to advanced settings, and you're going to scroll down until you see this button that says add a custom extension. So you're going to do this in Goose. And then we're going to fill in a little bit of detail here. So we have an extension name of jokes. We'll do the same for the description. We need to make sure this is set to standard I/O. The command here, this is where you need to have that disk path handy as well. And this is where we're going to say UV run, and then we give it that path. Sorry, one sec here. I was going to pull up my own instructions over here too. All right, so what we're going to add in Goose, sorry, let me just go back to Goose here, is we're going to say UV run, and then this is going to be the path to your MCP main.py. So for me, it's going to be users end MCP jokes MCP main.py. So this is the core path of where I checked out my repo, and then inside of that is the jokes MCP folder, and inside of that is main.py. So inside of Goose, or if you're doing Goose configure, you can add a custom extension. In the Goose UI, you're going to click on the settings icon, go to advanced settings, and scroll down to where you see this button to add a custom extension. And then we need to give it a name, a description, and this command. But again, your path is going to be a little bit different here based on where you checked out that code. Yep. Yep, so great question is why are we doing this? This is basically adding our MCP server as an extension in Goose. Goose is basically an MCP client. And so we're giving it an extension, which is an MCP server, so that Goose can interact with that. So now we can ask Goose to tell us a joke, and it's going to go interact with that MCP server, and that MCP server is calling our API, our joke API. The idea of extensions here within Goose is that it can interact with other MCP servers, which can interact with anything else, whether it's an API, a file system, controlling your computer in some way. I think I mentioned before you came in, I've got like a little autonomous rover that drives around my basement to drive my dog crazy, and I can have Goose like go give the dog some exercise, and it knows to like go drive this thing around, and the dog chases after it. And so MCP has a lot of flexibility. So this is basically what we're doing here is we're setting up that MCP server so that Goose knows how to talk to that. Okay, so when we add that extension, all right, so we got a failure right away. And this could be because we haven't finished configuring everything. So we'll get there. It's We do need to add it. We will be telling Goose periodically, like, go restart the extension, and then we'll go from here. So we're going to start back here in main.py. Now, this is the code that is just initially checked out. Oh, sorry, that's my API. Let me go over to the MCP. Okay, so in the MCP, if you've changed where your API lives, like if you're connecting to a different IP address or if you're going to run it on a different port, you'll need to configure that in the MCP server here. And the other thing that we need to do is we need to type in a name here. So we're just going to add jokes. So down here on line 35, in the MCP main.py, we need to give it a name inside of here for the fast MCP. And we're just going to call it jokes. Now, this MCP server doesn't do anything yet. We're basically going to start adding some code to it. For the sake of time, normally, so previously I was a software teacher, and I know that actually typing in code makes the connection in your brain a little bit better when you actually type in the code and you see it work. For the sake of the workshop, we could probably copy and paste out of the GitHub repo README file. I usually recommend that for the documentation blocks and actually manually writing in the code, but I think for the sake of time today, we'll probably copy and paste some stuff out of the README. All right, give me one sec here. Okay, the first thing that we're going to add in here is just a status check that makes sure that everything is working the way that we expect it to. And so what we're going to do in our fast MCP is we're going to use a Python decorator, mcp.resource. Now this resource will need to be a URI. And so we're going to do it as a resource, and we're going to call it status. Oops. It helps if you spell things correctly. And all we're going to do here is, let's call this like get MCP status. And this is just going to give us back a dictionary. Sorry, code completion is trying to be overly helpful here. And all we're going to do in this status check is we just want to know, is the server running or not? And what we want to do in this status check is we want to make sure that the API is running. Just for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this code. But what we're going to do here is we're going to use the request library in Python just to go connect with our API. So up top, we had those global variables for hostname and port, and we're just going to call the /status endpoint. Now, if you do this as a curl command, where you go to localhost :8000/status, it should tell you whether the API is running and how many jokes are found in the database. There should be about 36 jokes or something in there. But this is just going to do a quick status check. Now, we're not really providing any information to our AI agent about what this does. And so if we were to ask Goose, like, hey, is everything working okay? It might infer that we're asking about the status, but this is where documentation blocks really play a big part in fast MCP. And so what we can do in fast MCP is we can provide a really detailed documentation block, and I'm just going to copy and paste it here just to show you the level of what I would typically write in here, is we're going to have all of this documentation. If I put it in the right spot here. Did I not grab the right? Sorry, it's really hard to do this with one hand. So we want a very descriptive documentation block. So you can see I've got like a full screen load of just documentation here about what this resource is doing. What fast MCP is going to do is, even though we've written this as a Python comment, fast MCP is actually going to take all of this and give this as inference to the AI agent that's connecting to this, or the MCP client that's connecting with this. And so we want this to be as descriptive as possible. so that when Goose first enables the extension and say, hey, go check on the status, the first thing that Goose is going to do is it's going to query the MCP server for what are your capabilities? What can you do? And it's going to ask for a list of all the resources, all the tools, any prompts, templates, and so on. And basically from there, then try to unpack, okay, what was it that Ian was asking me to do in the first place, and then go see whether any of this matches. So the more descriptive you can be in this documentation, the better. This is exactly what OpenAI was trying to do when they wanted ChatGPT to interact with OpenAPI. They basically said, write as much documentation in your OpenAPI spec as possible so that ChatGPT knows how to interact with it. It's basically the same thing. It's just way easier to do here in your code than to try to go back and forth or have technical writers mess with your OpenAPI spec, and now they mess up your OpenAPI spec and nothing works. Now you can just do that in MCP here, and you can provide that documentation, the context in here. So now if I go back to Goose and I say restart the connection, or I can just try and re-enable it here, and let's see if that works. So that still failed. What's up?
I think I know why it's happening. If you, yeah, I can keep.
123, module not found. So, oh, well, UV run should have done that. Is it another UV problem?
Yeah, it's a UV issue,
Okay.
but you can do UV run -- with fast MCP, and that'll fix it.
Like that? And then main.py? Okay. So we can see that that's running here in my terminal. If I stop it from here, Control-C may not always stop it. Control-/ usually will. And now from here, this might be where I end up needing to do that pkill command.
Yeah. Just to kind of explain it a little, what happens is, yeah, maybe if you do an ls here, yeah, when you run it from this directory, UV looks at the log file, so it knows what the dependencies are. So that's why you don't need the with fast MCP. But when you're running it from Goose, it's actually not like finding the UV toml or the UV lock. So you have to kind of specify what packages do you need, because UV is kind of running from a different place. Yeah.
But I'm still getting that error in Goose where I wasn't getting it.
If you change the
Yeah, you have to change the command here.
Yeah, but I didn't have to do that before.
I know it's
Yeah, okay. So we have fast MCP. All right.
yeah. You don't. I've found this too. There's like some caching stuff
Yep.
happens sometimes with UV, which is weird. Okay, so request. So you can do like a comma request. It's the same thing.
But UV is supposed to redo all of that. That's why I'm confused, like why this is happening. Sorry, folks. This used to work on my machine. So we're gonna have to do that for everything that we're trying to use, but I didn't have to do this before.
Yeah. So let's try it with that. But I just had to do it for him, so that's why.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, no worries.
No. Okay. So now we get a success up in the top corner. Now we can scroll all the way back up and. Okay. So what I had to change in the command, let me just go back and show you again what I had to do. Where we added that extension in Goose, I basically had to change the command to include this portion right here. So in between the UV run and the path to your main.py, we also need to add -- with fast MCP comma requests. I didn't have to do this while I was building up this workshop, so apologies for that. I know we've lost a fair bit of time just getting the setup going here. So once you build that, you have to scroll right back up to the very top to go back. And then from here, we can say, is the jokes extension working? What this is going to do, we should see Goose say like, oh, let me go find like what's available here. So it's asking for a list of resources from that MCP server and then checking to see what that status is. And then it should give us a response here, what it sees about that. And it gave back quite a bit of information here. So the extension is working. According to the status resource that's running, it has 36 jokes available. And so this is a whole separate app, basically running as an MCP client that's interacting with the server that we're writing. So let's do this. Since some folks are kind of like caught up, go ahead and keep working through the GitHub README file. It'll have all the different bits of code that you can add in there, have it add it, tell you a joke, search for a joke, and Salman and I are going to keep going around the room and helping people troubleshoot. So, is anybody else stuck on anything you need help? Yep, I'm just going to grab back here. Yeah, give me 1 sec. Yep, just give me 1 sec, folks. So what I'm doing in my terminal here, just real quick, folks, is realizing that something's gotten stuck in a loop where I had a whole bunch of these main.py processes running, and pkill didn't work, and so I'm basically going through and I'm killing all these process IDs. Unfortunately, this is an ugly side of doing MCP development, where sometimes things have to be manually stopped. He's still getting some authentication errors with OpenRouter. All right, so I'm going to go back and restart my API. All right, and I'm asking Goose again, is my joke extension working? And then hopefully from here it's going to go back, and it's basically going to recheck that list of resources every time. And then based on that, it's not working properly. All right. All right. Apologies, folks.
We should need to run the MCP.
You should not need to manually run the MCP server, no. I was just doing that as a check in the terminal to make sure that it would run properly.
Yeah, that works for us too.
Yeah.
For some reason.
But Goose isn't running it, it looks like. Or well, if I go back and I look at my Goose setup here, it is enabled. And so Goose is trying to run the extension. It's just having a problem calling that access endpoint, or the status endpoint. So I need to double check what's going on with that. So what I'm going to do here is I want to look at how I built out that code. So get MCP status. We have our resource of status, got our doc block, and this is just making a request call. The only thing that we could be running into here is maybe a request is having an issue. So in the GitHub documentation, I actually have a try except block around this that I didn't put in here just for brevity, but I think I'm actually going to put that back in. Just maybe it's a problem with the request library. So we'll try that again. And then again in Goose, I'm just going to say restart the joke extension and check status. Now, if you're certain that your code is correct and your MCP client isn't seeing it, then go check your terminal and see how many main.py processes you have running. And you might need to kill those off, restart your API, and go from there. So this is also having problems connecting to my local host. Yeah, okay. All right, so my API is running. And all I'm going to tell Goose here is try again. Okay, and in this case, it did come back and say I've got those jokes and so on. But Goose is also saying like, hey, you know, this joke thing should have all these other things, but I don't actually see that. What's happening in the code here is if we go to the very top of main.py, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit on this real quick. At the very, very top of the MCP server main.py, we're giving it a whole bunch of other information here, including a list of the resources and tools that we were going to build in the workshop. And again, FastMCP will give all of this documentation to any MCP client that connects to it. And so any sort of commenting that you put in the code as a doc block like this, FastMCP is going to give back as context. And so what Goose is telling me here is the status check worked, but it's also saying like, hey, I see other stuff being referenced in here, but I don't actually see that when I ask for a list of resources and tools. I don't see these other things. And that's basically just signaling that Goose asked it for a list of resources and tools, and this information came back about this should be possible, but then when it actually got a list of the resources and tools, these weren't listed because we haven't built them yet. This all worked at my hotel last night.
What happens if you try curling because my API is no longer responding?
So if you did the pkill command, it's also going to kill the main.py, which is your API. So if you have that in another terminal, just go back and rerun your API. That's what I was saying at the very beginning of the workshop. It was kind of my fault on that because the API server and the MCP server I both called main.py, and I should have been less generalized about that. Can you run the API?
Yeah. So let's just start by and then I run the API.
Yep.
API runs.
Yep.
And then when I try to curl it, then it's the right.
So we haven't built. Well, actually, /joke should return something. Can you curl status instead of joke?
Oh wait, sorry, this is not. It's at 8,000.
Yep.
And then if I do status.
Do you have any kind of firewalling or anything on?
It used to work. So I think it's possible that the
So it can't connect. So the pkill, because we gave it main.py, it should have killed the MCP server and the API server.
Yeah, but when I looked at when I did the
Mm-hmm.
for the processes, I think there were also some Python processes that
Yes, and all of those need to get killed. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah. So if we go back and we look at my terminal where I was doing that myself, I didn't have just this UV main.py. I also had all these like homebrew calls. Those also need to get killed. Yeah, because they're spawning child processes. So it's launching the one and then it's killing, or it's doing the child process. So you have to kill all of them. Yeah, or figure out what the parent process is and kill that, and it should stop the children process. Yep.